Hi, I'm Paul Bedford from Retention Guru, and this is the first of 3 training sessions that I've put together, 3 online lessons, 3 online webinars, whatever you want to call them, about recovering quickly within your business. But they can also be used more generally to help your business grow. So when we are clear of the pandemic, when we are trading in near normal circumstances, these 3 sessions will also help you with your business in general. Now, the first one that I'm going to cover today, and is the onboarding of members and looking at that process. The second one is about building loyalty, and I'm also going to look at exercise adherence. And in the third one, I'm going to look at re-engaging and recovering customers or members who are thinking of leaving. So let's get on that now by looking at onboarding members. Now, I would say this: you can make the onboarding process as simple or as complex as you want to make it, but you must make it effective. There is absolutely no point whatsoever in setting aside time to onboard your new members into your club if it doesn't achieve a specific outcome. Now, you need to sit down right at the beginning and say, okay, what do we want people to be able to do at the end of this process? So you're beginning with the end in mind. You're looking at how much time, how complex you're going to make this onboarding process, but you're also going to say who's it for and who's it not for. Now, within that process, now one of the things that I think's become probably more apparent to me with the number of organisations I've worked with now is that the onboarding process often becomes a place to introduce new ideas and concepts. But at the same time, many of the things that were already there don't get removed. So it becomes this really, really crowded experience. And I've often referred to it when I'm working with my clients as almost like the dumping ground for the new stuff. Now, I don't mean that in a negative way in terms of the new stuff, but I do mean it in terms of a dumping ground. So if we think back more historically, what was the purpose of an onboarding process? It was to orientate people to perhaps the gym floor or to the club as a whole. Now, as things have evolved, what has to go into that? Well, we often, waivers now might be done at sales, point of sale, but sometimes physical activity questionnaires like a PAR-Q might be done during the onboarding process. So that was in there. Now, we then had to show people how to use equipment and teach them how to use equipment. Why was that there? Well, that was part of our processing, but it was also to offset some of the limitations or the liabilities in case of litigation further along the line. We've shown you how to use it. Therefore, if you hurt yourself using it, that's down to you. But what we continue to do is we continue to add things. You know, at the moment, mental health is a big issue around the world. And so I've now started seeing people adding mental health questionnaires into their onboarding process, and nutritional questionnaires and sleep questionnaires, and they want to measure blood pressure and they want to do fitness testing, and all of that gets added, but very little gets taken away. The only thing that gets reduced is the actual amount of time the new member gets to try the equipment and practice that equipment under supervision. So you're going to want to balance the exercise experience. You're going to have to take into So you're going to want to balance the exercise experience. And the 3 things you've got to balance are time, how long you've got to actually play with, the content, what you're going to include, and then the capability, what are they going to be able to do at the end of that session. And there's like a 3-way pulling thing of like, well, if I add that, I can't do that, and if I put that in, it will take longer. And so you're going to play around with these three elements in order to come up with the ideal onboarding experience for your business. Now, the first one I'm going to focus on is how long do you have? Is this going to be a single appointment onboarding process, or is it going to be multiple onboarding? Now, I have experience of doing lots of multiple onboarding. In fact, my PhD study was looking at multiple onboarding processes, and they have both their advantages and their disadvantages. Sometimes we just don't have the resource to offer multiple appointment onboarding processes, so we have to get it done in one session. If we have a large number of staff, or there's a certain type of person that needs onboarding, then sometimes we have that resource and we can do multiple sessions. But this is what I think personally the basic onboarding process should look like. There should be about 10 minutes of talking and questioning. This could be the sit down part. This could be the if I have to do it here, let me do the physical activity readiness questionnaire. This is where I'm going to ask questions about what was your reason for joining, what's your level of experience, what are you hoping to get from coming to the gym. Those are the types of things I'm going to do. Then I'm going to spend the next 50 minutes practicing, using that time to teach, demonstrate, and get the customer, the member, practicing the exercises so we build their confidence and their competence. Now, if you've got a multiple session, you have to think how many minutes are each of those sessions going to last. In some situations, I've looked at these and they've been 60 minutes each, so you get up to 4 hours with a client over a perhaps 4-week period. In others, they scale down. And as I said, in my PhD, we had a scaled down one, so we went from 60 to 30 to 20 to 10 over the 4-week period. And this is what it looked like. So in the first 4 weeks of membership, we offered people 4 appointments. The first appointment was 60 minutes long, and in fact it was pretty much the same onboarding process as the control group. In fact, it was the same onboarding process for the control group, and it was the same onboarding process that the club had always used. All we did here was we added just a little bit of extra time outside of the 60 minutes to do any paperwork relative to the study. And at the end, we asked the new member to book a second appointment, a follow-up appointment in the second week. In the second week, we did 30 minutes with the customer, but then let them go off and exercise on their own for 15 minutes. Then the following week to that, they had 20 minutes of supervision plus some behaviour change techniques, and then 25 minutes to practice on their own. And then in the final 4th week, we had 10 minutes of supervised practice, some behaviour change techniques, and then 35 minutes where they went off and practiced on their own. But what you need to be aware of here is that during those appointments, because we did the 60-minute onboarding process right at the beginning, the standard one, customers were able to members were actually able to come in and train on their own unsupervised. So in the first 4 weeks, we had periods of time when people were training unsupervised, when they were training supervised and getting feedback from staff, as well as periods where we would go through behaviour change. And we mapped and planned that out. Now, in our process, what we didn't insist on was it was the same member of staff doing it each week. In fact, we encouraged people to have a different member of staff take them through each session. All staff could deliver any of the sessions, therefore it was fairly straightforward to deliver. And our reason for that was they got to meet more staff. So when they came in and they were working out, they knew more people, whereas if it had only been one person doing all 4 weeks, then they would have only met one person. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to both. We went down the route where we wanted them to meet more people. Now, multiple appointment onboarding processes are not new. In fact, they've been around a very long time. In fact, they came out of some original research work done by a friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Melvin Hillsdon. So back in 2002, he identified that people who come at least once a week in the first 4 weeks can stay up to an extra 13 extra weeks in their membership. So what a lot of operators did was they looked at saying, okay, how can we make people come 4 times in the first 4 weeks to get this magic number that encourages people to come for longer? And So what many of them did was they extended their onboarding processes. And here in the UK, organisations like David Lloyd, they introduced what they called the health and fitness experience. And their comment was, the goal is to understand the behaviour of our members so that we can shift our resources to support their needs. Now, they weren't the only people to do that. Other people like Banana Fitness was a brand at the time that was doing a 5-appointment onboarding process. And, here, a very different format. It had a lifestyle consultation, which was basically a seated conversation about what the person wanted to achieve. The following week, they'd come in and they would do a CV workout and get a CV program. The following week, they'd come and get a resistance training workout and maybe train their abs, which we now call core. Week 4, they got a program update. And then week 5, they were looking at some results or reviewing what the customer had done already. Now, that was an approach that was introduced. It's not an approach I would introduce. I might, if I was using 5 sessions, I'd use them in a very different way. But lots of operators have come up with their own multiple appointment onboarding processes. If you've got the time and you've got the resource, they're a great technique for increasing customer retention. However, if you don't have the resources and you need to get it done in one session, then there are lots of things you can do to do that. Now, if you take something like a Barry's Boot Camp or an Orange Theory or a F45, these very intense group exercise workouts, one of the things you think is you're going to have to onboard someone into this. Now, most of the onboarding takes place as a process just prior to the start of the class. But if you've got, and these types of classes do attract a lot of experienced exercises. They're very intense, they're very hard. This was a picture pre-COVID. I'm not sure how we're going to be able to perhaps replicate that for the next few months when we reopen fully. But think about how you'd onboard in this situation. How would you onboard in a group exercise situation? You need to plan out what's the experience the person's going to have. Now, I was fortunate to visit an Orange Theory a few years ago when I was in Florida. It was an early morning class, 5 o'clock. We booked it. I went with a friend of mine. We turned up. We said our names. We were introduced to the instructor. They tried to gauge our level of experience and knowledge of exercises and framed the workout. They said, you'll do this, then you'll do this, then you'll do this, and this is how it works. But it was pretty much expected that we would know how to do those exercises. Now, was there individual coaching as we worked out? Yes, there was. But we were experienced exercisers. I do think in many of these environments, there's a lot of assumptions made about people's ability to be able to join in and train at the appropriate levels. That's not me criticising, it's just me making an observation saying we need to think this through, because as someone new coming into one of these environments, these types of challenging workouts may actually put them off exercise long term because they don't know what to experience, or they don't know the intensity they're going to experience. Now, you need to decide who your onboarding processes is for. Is it for everybody? Is everybody who's coming to your facility, every new member, are they going to be onboarded in the same way? That would be fairly true of those examples I've just given of F45, Barry's and Orange Theory. Or are you going to target particular groups of new members and say, for you, this is an onboarding process we feel you would benefit from, but for others, you don't necessarily make it compulsory. Now, some businesses, let's say like David Lloyd at the time, wanted everybody to go through that onboarding process. Now, if you're an experienced exerciser, you may not feel like you want to go through that. You may not feel, actually, I don't really care about you showing me exercises. I know what exercises I'm going to do. I don't want my blood pressure done. I don't want that experience. So you'll need to decide, is this for everybody, or is this for a few, or is this for a particular type of group that you're focusing on? Now, if you've ever listened to me present before, you'll understand that I generally talk about 3 types of members. Now, within that three types, there are the new exercises, and these are the ones who've never been an exerciser before. These are the ones who are perhaps coming back post-COVID and saying, do you know what, health is important to me. I've never really made an effort to look after my health. What can I do? And they have decided to join a club, but they've never been a member of a club before. Then at the bottom, you've got the savvy. These are the people who know what they're doing. You're savvy. If you're watching this session, you are savvy because you're involved in the exercise and fitness environment. Now, if you turned up at a club, you might decide that you don't need to be onboarded in the same way as a new person, particularly if the onboarding process includes fixed resistance machines or cardiovascular machines or a range of equipment you don't use anyway in your workout because you mainly do free weights or functional training, or you do body weight type exercises. So the savvy are pretty much the ones who can come in and get on with it on their own. The group that I think we misunderstand the most are the yo-yos. I call them yo-yos because they've started and stopped exercise on several occasions. They may have been a member of your club before and then stopped, or a member of other clubs and then stopped. But they've never really adopted a regular behaviour of exercise. Now, in the way we look at things, we would group the new and the yo-yo together, not the yo-yo and savvy together, because we feel that the yo-yos, they've not been successful. They're still trying to adopt exercise as a healthy lifestyle. However, they've not been there. So we would group them together. Then you can start to ask questions around, which one of these best describes you, and take it through the types of questions I've got here on the screen. Now, but then you need to make a decision is about perception of choice. So if you're new and new to working out, or you're yo-yo, I would make the suggestion to people is that if you're that type of person, then these are the sorts of things we think we can do to support you get started. Whereas if you're a savvy exerciser, I'd still offer an onboarding process, but I would give them a choice. I'd say, now your choice is either we can meet you at the gym, walk you around, cover some health and safety aspects, highlight any machines you may not have seen before, or the nuances of these machines or equipment compared to the equipment you've used previously, or you can have the full onboarding program that we offer anyone who's new to exercise. I would always give them that choice, and I actually put the choice decision on the customer. I don't think the staff should be making that choice. I think it's the customer should be making that choice. And that those types of questions about which one of these best describes you leads them into the type of support you provide them. Now, when you do your onboarding process, you'll need to make a decision. Is this going to be for one, or is it going to be for many? Now, the research we've done, and we've not updated this in a little while, but customers who have a one-to-one onboarding or induction process stay longer than people who have group. Now, when I talk about group, I am talking about a mass of people. I'm not talking about two friends who turn up and want to be onboarded together. I'm talking about people who don't know each other, all standing around and waiting or watching one person. Now, this can be a challenge because in the past, I've I still do work with a lot of universities, and when the new students come in, they're in their first semester, a lot of them join, and I've worked with operators who are joining 12,000 people in a month because all the students have come back, and you cannot physically do one-to-one appointments with them. What you can do is you can do more group environments, or if it's a new club opening, you might do that. But my preference would always be to do one-to-one or one-to-few onboarding. The example I give when I'm teaching this within clubs is, it's a bit like a driving education or driving lesson. I don't want to sit there, one of many in a car, with an instructor showing me what to do, and then I get to practice one manoeuvre. I get to practice the emergency stop, but someone else then swaps seats with me and they get to practice reversing around a corner. I think the learning experience, particularly for the new and for the yo-yo, needs to be much more personalised. It needs to be much more structured around what their learning capabilities are and how fast they're picking things up. Whereas often with groups, we've got a mixed capability within a group. So you've got those people who are experienced and those people who are completely new. And the whole experience is not a positive one. So I'm not a fan of big group inductions or big group onboardings unless there's a specific reason for it. Now, something to think about if you're going to do the multiple onboarding process is the amount of time you're going to take and how much you're going to allot. So here's a very simple one that I would look at, is like the 60-minute general orientation to the equipment. Then 30 minutes or session 2, 30 minutes would probably be an equipment recap. Let's go through all the equipment we taught you in the first session, maybe adjust some resistances, maybe adjust some seat positions, maybe introduce you to some variety within a console. And then in the third session, it's just a check-in. It might just be a check-in. Now notice that with all the language that I'm using, I'm talking about resistance machines and cardiovascular machines, because that's usually where the onboarding process is. Now, if you've got a lot of functional equipment or a large free weights area, that may not be the place you're taking your new customer. You can take them there later on in their experience, and when I say later, I mean in the few months' time, and you can point that out to them. We're going to start you here and we're going to progress you over time. Whereas a savvy exerciser, they probably won't necessarily want to be on as many resistance machines or cardio. They're more likely to want to go and do your functional area or go and do free weights. Now, if your onboarding process doesn't accommodate that, that's a complete waste of time to them. So you need to sort of think, if we're bringing on savvy members, do they need to do the onboarding process? It's that balancing of time, content and capability. What do they need? When do they need it? And how do we support that? Because actually, if they don't need onboarding these savvy exercises as much, you can put more resource into supporting the ones that do need it. Now, once you've decided how many sessions you might choose, you then need to think about the content. Now, is it going to be simple or is it going to be complex? How much are you going to put in there? As I said at the beginning of this session, it can often feel like a dumping ground when we're putting more and more and more things in to the onboarding process, because that's where we've decided they'll fit in, yet it can be complete overload for the member experience. So what can go into it? Well, you can do health screening, fitness assessment and testing. You might do postural assessment, goal setting, exercise demonstration and teaching, exercise practice from their perspective, program design with exercises and loads. You might be a fan of behavior change theories or modifications and you want to put some behavior change in there. Maybe this is also part of your upselling process for personal training. But also you might need to include technology there, downloading apps. A lot of clubs have implemented a lot of app-based training sessions and app-based access and cues. And often that's now being put into the onboarding process, particularly for the gym use. And that can take time. That can take a lot of time. And are you going to include, what the etiquette is for exercise and the rules that you have within your business? Now, if you're going to include things like 3D scanners or body fat, you're going to need to prep people for these. You're going to need to give them information in advance. You're going to need to make them aware of what they can and can't wear. You're going to need to make think about their hydration levels, planning that, informing of that. And think about the amount of time that actually takes to complete. You might do some blood pressure measurements, some other health indicators. Here's a traditional stethoscope and sphygmomanometer measuring blood pressure. Although personally, I'd be holding that at the end of that stethoscope, and I'd have the stethoscope in my ears. But that's just a picture, I'm sure it is. Or you might decide to do You might decide to do some other health indicators. You might decide that measuring blood pressure is part of your process. And if you're a particular type of business, if you're a medical wellness centre, this is probably more expected of you, where perhaps if you're a boutique gym or studio, this is less likely to be part of your onboarding process. But you need to think about the types of instructions you're giving. And I think even more importantly, you have to really consider, what do you say to people when you give them their results? I know, having taught many people how to do fitness assessments, having done the ACSM protocols myself, I listen to people running tests and at the end of it going, oh, you thought you were a bit overweight. Well, actually, according to my charts, you're obese. Which doesn't go down very well with a new member, doesn't really give them a sense of, I'm in the right place. It might be truly accurate, but you have to think about the way in which the information is fed back. Maybe you want to go all out and you're going to do VO2 max tests and wear a white lab coat. Personally, I think we should move away from the white lab coat concept. We're not medical. I know there's a lot of shouts to say, oh, we're part of the medical industry. I don't think we should portray ourselves in this environment in this particular way. I think we should be much more relaxed. Now, you also might be the type of facility that is more about functional and performance. So the types of measures you use during this onboarding process might be different. You might be using the ski erg, you might be looking at some postural or functional movements or some dynamic movements. You have to think about, how are you going to prep people for this? Are you going to warm them up? How much time is that going to take? What are all the results that you get from that? How are they going to help, firstly, the customer understand what to do when they come and work out, and secondly, what that does for your programming. Now, if you're a PT studio and this is about your onboarding so that you can get a base level measurement, I have no problem with that. But just sticking some of this stuff in just for the sake of it, to show members, oh, look how clever, look what we can do, I'm not a fan of that. I'm actually a bigger fan of keeping this as simple as possible so it's easier for people to remember. You might include goal setting. There's a whole range of goal setting approaches you can use. The traditional one, SMART goals, which is at the top of the list, I'd actually put at the bottom of the list. I'd finish with doing some SMART goals. Open goals or range goals. Open goals are about do your best. Today you're going to do, my goal today's workout is to do my best. Whereas range goals are, let's see if you can lift between 8 and 12 repetitions rather than saying you need to lift 10. And then superordinate goals, which are probably my favourite as a behavioural psychologist. These are the ones that are drivers of behaviour. These are the motivators that get people to turn up week in, week out. Now, they are usually abstract experiences. I will feel better. I will look better. I would start with superordinate goals, identify those, and then use SMART and open and range goals to structure some way of checking that somebody's achieving their results. But goal setting certainly could be part of your onboarding process. Now, I've already mentioned it a little bit, but where's your technology going to fit in? Where are you going to teach them, or how are you going to get them to download the apps that perhaps your business is using? What about the consoles on the cardiovascular equipment? These can be quite complex now. How long are you going to take? How much are you going to teach? Are you just going to teach them the quick start to get them started, but then leave them there and never really take advantage of all the functionality of these consoles? Or are you going to spread that information out over a period of time? What if the customer turns up with their own technology, something like an Apple Watch, a smart watch or a smart device? How are you going to incorporate that into their process and their program? Now, I'd say we're going to be, as a business, we would focus perhaps on 3 pieces of these technology. I'd probably want to know how to use an Apple Watch, perhaps Garmin or a Fitbit, and MyZone, so that all the staff that are doing the onboarding process fully understand what each of these products can do, so you can build them into the customer experience. You might also need to think about access control, how people get in and out of the facilities, because that's how you're using technology as well. And as I've already mentioned, perhaps the fitness trackers, what are you going to track, when you're going to track it, and are you going to help your new members use this technology to improve their overall experience. But this is one of those areas where I think we've squeezed more and more of this into the onboarding process, but and we've had to sacrifice the actual practice use of the equipment and getting feedback on technique in order to do this. Now, another dilemma you might want to do is you might want to go, whoa, we're going to talk about nutrition. You know, should we eat an apple? Should we eat an orange? My experience of these onboarding processes and all the work that I did in clubs and when I worked in clubs was that we always parked nutrition for later. It's not that it's not important, but if you're from an academic perspective, as an academic, if you try and change more than one behavior at a time, you often see people struggling and not completing that. Whereas if you focus on just one behavior, things like learning how to use the equipment, learning how to become a gym user, you coming and turning up for classes, what you realize is over time people start to make small modifications to their diet themselves. But I would probably put this off to one side rather than trying to squeeze that in as well, or even, you know, trying to do stuff on mindfulness or trying to talk about sleep patterns and how you sleep. It all becomes very, very complex. And what's the behavior you want at the end of this? You want the customer, the member, to be able to do the exercise. Now, for a group exercise environment, what's your onboarding process? Most operators fail to really think this through. Most operators are looking at the onboarding process for group exercises, sign up. Oh, and if you want to go and look at the studio timetable and pick a class, you just turn up. You probably want to do a little bit more than that. You do need to understand, you know, the rules and the etiquette of going into a group exercise class. You know, if your club has a set of rules that is, you must be there 5 minutes early, you can't enter 5 minutes after the class has started, you need to let people know that, and you need to let them know why that is, not just say that's a rule. You need to explain it to them. You need to explain to them about who gets the equipment out, who puts the equipment away, who's responsible for cleaning, the general structure of the class. And if you've got names of sessions or workouts that are unique to you, you need to make sure that those people who are choosing to do group exercise understand what each of those means. There are an awful lot of people who think that yoga and Pilates are basically the same thing, because when they look in through the window, they see people laying on the floor at different times, standing at different times. It looks like they're doing the same thing. It's a similar mistake that people make when they look at Olympic weightlifting and powerlifting. They're using exactly the same equipment, apart from a bench, but it's like, isn't that the same thing? No, they're not. So you need to be able to explain that. Now, things that we've seen people do very, very well in the past, some of our clients have done it as well, is short little videos on the website explaining each class. This is a body pump class. This is a grit class. This is a mind-body class. This is what you can expect. So then there isn't the same 60-minute period of taking someone through something, but there is an explanation of what to expect, how it will be delivered, and what you can expect to experience having done one of those workouts. But remember, for the new customer, for the new member, what we're trying to avoid is what's called cognitive overload, where we've given them so much information, their head's just spinning and they can't take it all in. That is a challenge that we have to take on board ourselves. When we're trying to put more and more of these things in, there's only a certain amount that anyone's going to remember at any one time. Simplifying things means people are more likely to be successful because we only give them a few things to think about. That does, though, compromise some of the more sophisticated things we might want to do. But this is where that challenge becomes between time, content, and complexity in terms of what the customer can cope with. I normally talk about this when I'm running workshops for clients within their businesses. This is for the simple 4-step process that I just try and present. The first thing we want is to build the confidence of our new members in the use of the facilities. Secondly, we want to build their competence in the use of whatever we've taught them. So if they went into a group exercise class, they've got basic competencies in a group exercise class. If it's on a cardiovascular machine or a resistance machine, that's basic competence there. Then if we do that and they get to practice, so they're building their confidence, they're building their competence, we will start to get their trust. When we've got their trust, they will continue to exercise. When they continue to exercise, they will get success. They will get success, but also will get success. Because we've made them, or we've helped them to be successful, they will continue at some level to use our business or our services. So let's just go back to the basic onboarding for a second. If I was designing one or a really basic structure, I'd have 10 minutes. And in this first 10 minutes, these are the things I'd be looking to do. Now, that's quite a lot of things to do. I'd want to build rapport. I'd want to frame the whole session saying what we're going to do in the first 10 minutes is this, then we're going to go and do whatever we're going to go and do in the rest of the time. I want to exchange information. I want to know what they know about exercise, and I want to let them know a little bit about how we're going to help them experience more of that within our club or facility. So we're going to clarify the customer's experience or the member's experience. We're going to identify their desired outcomes. And again, this is where the superordinate goals come in. This is where they give, and often these get dismissed, but these are the ones where people are saying, I want to lose weight. And we go into the detail of how much weight is that, but actually, I want to lose weight. Okay, so if you lost weight, what would that do for you? Those types of descriptions they then give you, those tend to be the things that drive that behavior. Then I'll be more confident. Then I'd feel like going out again. Then I'd feel like dating. Then I'd feel a lot more like I did when I was 30 years old. Those are the motivators and the drivers. Then we can get into the detailed goal setting. So identify their desired outcomes and then look at their availability. I think it's really important to get real clarity on availability really early on. Which days of the week, not how many days, which days of the week are you going to come and train? And what time are you going to come and train? Not how long are you going to come and train for. I want to know what day and at what time are you going to come and train. When we can get people to identify that, they're much more likely to come and exercise, rather than if we're saying, how often were you thinking of training and how long for? 3 times a week for about 60 minutes. Show me which 3 days you're coming on. Show me where those 60 minutes will fit within your diary. Because one of the things that we've recognised from interviewing lots of people who are new to exercise is they've thought about coming, but they haven't thought about actually what it means to fit that within their week. They want to join a gym, they want to work out in a club, they want to use a boutique, but they haven't worked out when they're physically going to do that. So really get clear on that. Then in the second part, in the onboarding, I'd want to spend a lot of time demonstrating exercises. I'd want to observe the member's performance. I want to praise and encourage. I'd probably want to identify or establish a resistance level or a level on cardio equipment, but the actual physical load that they're going to experience. From that, I'm going to develop a basic exercise program for them to follow. At the end of this, I'm going to summarize what they've done. So I'm going to talk about what we talked about in the first 10 minutes, and then in a summary format, And I'm going to say, then we went and did these exercises because you said you wanted this. We've included these exercises. And then I'd clarify when their first visit on their own was going to be. So today we've done this. When are you going to come back and practice this? And I would talk to them about learning the language of being an exerciser. If you were learning piano today, you would not be able to, you wouldn't expect after one lesson to be able to perform, something, some sort of Mozart concerto. You'd be able to tap a few keys, maybe know where the different notes are. It's the same in the gym. Do not expect people to then just be able to do it. What we want to do is we want to clarify the next visit and get them into the idea that actually visits builds the knowledge and the understanding of exercise, and each visit gets them closer to their goal. Now, what I see in a typical onboarding is the first 45 minutes is par cues, waivers, downloading apps, describe how to use the app, conduct different types of assessment, establish SMART goals, discuss nutrition, sleep patterns, stress, and then try and upsell personal training. And then only 15 minutes of that is left for the demonstrating, teaching, praise and encourage. And that's not going to lead to improved performance of the customer. This might get us what we want in terms of upselling personal training, but it probably won't get them established as an exerciser. So we really need to think about this balance between how much content we have and how many other things we have in there. Now, one of the ones that I've seen recently, because I've, in my time, I've probably had more than 100, or I know I've had more than 100 inductions or onboarding processes, because do that's part of what I do. And you'll just see I've added this in 3 times. In that first 45 minutes, actually, this isn't an onboarding process. This is really designed to try and upsell personal training. Now, that's fine if the customer clearly identifies they want personal training. I've seen businesses use what they call a triple pack, where it's the personal trainers taking them through 3 sessions, and every session's basically them trying to sell. I've spoken to major operators who say, well, actually, when you buy membership, what you're buying is access, and if you want help, what you then need to do is buy personal training. I just think you need to be really clear with customers and new members right up front. This is how we work. You buy access. If you want anything else, you have to pay for it. But don't market that you'll help them achieve everything on their own and then say, well, actually, you can't unless you have personal training. We've seen in our research that 10% of all PT is bought at point of sale, usually in the first month at the point of joining. About 30% of personal training is bought within 2 to 5 months, but more than 60% of all personal training is purchased after 6 months of being a member. And it's usually when members are struggling to actually achieve their goals. They've got some progression, but they've not got as much as they like. That's a really good time to intervene, because we can talk about accelerating the period of time that it takes, or accelerating the time. Now our research has shown that only 10% of people who buy personal training buy it at the join phase, and usually within the first month. About 30% buy it in months 2 to 5, and 60% buy it from month 6 onwards. Now, why do they wait till month 6? Most people coming in, joining, will think that they can achieve everything they want to achieve without a personal trainer. But they get to 6 months, they've got some results, but they've not quite got to where they want to in terms of their outcome goal. That's a really good time to say, if you want, we can accelerate the speed at which you're getting your results, and actually will get you to your goal much quicker. But look, it's a personal preference. I know how I feel about it. Your goal might be within your business. Our onboarding process is actually designed to sell personal training. Just be clear about that. Now, what will they be able to do after the onboarding session? What will their capability be? Now, this is a client's gym that I've worked with in Lithuania. There's nothing wrong with this gym. It's got brilliant range of equipment. But if you're new to exercise, you walk onto the gym floor, will you be able to navigate that gym floor? Will you know where the equipment is? You can design facilities, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to have the person come in and almost have a breakdown going, I can't remember where I'm supposed to go, what I'm supposed to do. So that goes back to this confidence, and competence is part of the process of the onboarding process. Now, if you look at the FOG behavioural model, where any behaviour is easier to do if, first of all, you have the motivation to do it. Secondly, you have the ability to do it, and at some point you get prompted. So if something's hard to do and you're not very motivated, no matter how often you prompt, you're probably not going to do it. But if it's easy to do and you're highly motivated, you're more likely to do it. Now, I know that sounds really, really obvious. For my master's degree, I looked at, do people, how does motivation predict adherence? That's basically what I was looking at. And what we found was motivation didn't predict adherence, visit frequency predicted adherence. But if people were actually more accurate at saying, I'll come 2 times a week, than going, I'll come 5 times a week, if they were clear about when they could come and how, at specific days and times, they were much more likely to do it. That allows us then to prompt them to do that exercise or that activity at that day and time of the week. So they're much more likely to be successful. Now, here's a layout of a facility. This one's in the Netherlands. I was partly involved in some stuff here, not fully, but the concept was something that I collaborated on. And what you hear again is like, you have a gym with a lot of equipment, but this has been simplified, particularly for the new exerciser and those who struggle to get going, these yo-yo exercises. And all we would do here is we say, okay, to make the process simple for you after the onboarding process, we want you to start here on this piece of cardiovascular equipment. Then what we're going to ask you to do is we're going to ask you to do each of these resistance machines just once in that order. So you work through them, you do your chest press, you do your seated row, you do your leg press, you do your pull down, then you do additional exercises, which I can't see on this diagram at the moment. Now, if you want to do more, just come back to one and go through it again. So yes, it looks like a circuit, but it's really simple for the new exerciser to follow. They don't have to seek out equipment on the gym floor. One of the places where I train is still all organised by muscle groups. So you've got a leg press, leg curl, leg extension, which is fine for me. I'm savvy. And then when I want to go and work chest, I know where to go to work chest. But it's actually a lot less easy to navigate if you're new to exercise. You actually have to try and remember, or you have to read the signs, or you have to look for numbers. And this was just a way of making things more simplistic in terms of helping the new exerciser understand where they needed to go. And then at the end we say just finish off with a piece of cardio there. Now you could keep circuiting through, you could progress them into sets and reps. There's lots of things you can do here, but it was a simple way of onboarding new exercisers into the gym environment. Now savvy exercisers, they don't care where the equipment is, they'll just go and use it. So it didn't matter that these weren't organised by muscle groups. In fact, there are other areas of this gym that are, and they were more focused on those experienced exercisers. Now, when it comes to actually teaching, I'm of the school where you do a demonstration and then the member gets to practice. Show them what to do and then get to practice. There are some schools of thought which is no demonstration and you evaluate their performance. They tend to be done more on postural activities. I'm not a fan of that, because I don't think, if you showed me how to do a lunge, my performance of a lunge the first time I ever did it would be much better than if I don't know what a lunge looks like. If you ask me to squat with my hands over my head holding a wooden pole, and I'd never seen that, then my performance isn't going to be as good as if you give me at least one example. So I do feel it sometimes sets people up to fail. Again, if it's the way you want to do things, that's entirely up to you. But I'm not convinced that the no demonstration evaluation enhances the experience for the customer. I think it just gives us more opportunities to show how clever we are by going, oh, I've looked at this, your alignment here is not good and you're tight in this area. Well, that might not be true once they've actually seen the exercise. Building confidence in the use of equipment. Explain how to use the equipment at the experience level of the member. Don't rush through this. Teach them one or two things. Don't try and teach them lots of things, but teach them something a bit more than quick start and manual. Lots of members would love the idea that they can do different types of workouts in different ways, but some of the consoles now are so complex that it takes an awful long time to explain them. So for me, really, in summarising most of this, focus on building confidence, catch them doing things right, and praise their effort and their technique when they get it right. Obviously correct them when they're wrong, but if you structure it well, they should be doing less things wrong so you can catch them doing more things right. You'll also need to explain to them about etiquette, shirts on, shirts off, depends where you are, putting weights away, helping other people. That'll all need to go into the onboarding process. Now, you might decide that you are going to include some upselling processes, and you might say you do an upsell of a PT package or a nutritional package or maybe other services. I would certainly put these things into what I call a product description. So if you have a nutritional package, I'd turn it into a product. I'd give it a brand name, something familiar to your business or similar to your business. I'd map it out. I'd say this is a 6-week, 8-week, 12-week, however many weeks it is, and have it almost like as a product, although that product is a service. You may be doing a standard or a basic onboarding process. You might have more medical measures you want to do. We also have a medical assessment where we can do your VO2 max, we can do a 3D scan, we can do your blood pressure, we can do your balance and your posture. And with that package, we also then offer a follow-up at this period of time and so many sessions with a specialist trainer. All of those things, are no issue with them going in. It's thinking about where you put them in and how much time and effort you spend focusing on them. I would say we often try and achieve too much too soon in too short a period of time. I think we've evolved so much in the last 20 years in this industry in terms of our technology and the content. It's a lot of trying to get all of that during an onboarding process. Really, really difficult. Again, think about driving lessons and driver education. How many times did you have to sit in that car and learn a new maneuver and practice and learn and practice 5, 10, 15, 20 times before you were ready to go for your test? We often give people a 1-hour onboarding process and then say, that's it, good luck, I hope all goes well. It's very difficult. That is why people are reverting to or heading for YouTube to learn how to exercise, and sometimes from not too great of an exercise teacher. So my final overview, you'll probably have a period of information gathering where you frame the session, build rapport and gain understanding of that member. Then you have the equipment setup, exercise demonstration, member practice, exercise choice and load identification. I'd make sure someone has a workout program that they can walk away with and follow the following time they come in. Whether you still do that on card, there's nothing wrong with that. Whether it's built within an app, whatever, give them something they can walk away with and follow as almost like as a map of their workout. We call it a program card or an exercise prescription, but just give them something. And then at the end of the session, explain to them what you did and why and where you're going to next, because we want to build this confidence, competence and trust with them so that we can get them back and we can do more sessions with them over a period of time. One of the things I would say is I'm not anti the World Health Organization guidelines on physical activity, but I would just pre-frame that by saying build up to 150 minutes of cardiovascular exercise a week, and then add you to build up to that. It's not the starting point. It's a place we should be heading to. And in fact, if you, like I do, look at a lot of data, there's only a small percentage of our membership that are actually achieving that on a weekly basis. So trying to achieve these isn't something you should avoid, but I think it's about over time building up to that bit rather than it being the entry or the start point. What does success look like? Well, You need to identify whether these programs or these onboarding programs are working for you and working for the customer. We would certainly be monitoring the effect of this. We're going to do what's now typically called A/B testing, split testing. So the new intervention versus the control. So we also want to work out what success looks like. What are the stages and steps to success? And is that success for us, for the member, or for both of us? Ideally, it should be for both of us. So we would monitor the effectiveness of anything that we do. So, more traditionally, or not more traditionally, we would monitor the effectiveness of any onboarding process we design. And nowadays we tend to call that A/B split testing because that's what marketing use. But if you look at this, I've got 4 groups here. I've got the new to exercise who've had the intervention, the new to exercise that have had the control, because I want to see, is my new onboarding process having a bigger impact than my old process? Then I've got the same for yo-yos in terms of intervention and control, and then I've split it down by staff member. So staff member A doing the new intervention, staff member A doing the new control. I would have all staff being able to do each group, but they need to be really clear about what they're doing. So we would split test to see what the impact is. We wouldn't just stop doing what we've done in the past. We'd put something in, we'd apply it, we'd measure it, we'd identify what our key measures are. We'd probably survey people afterwards going, how did you feel about the experience you had? How did you benefit from that? I'd be tracking visit frequency as well. And I'd be looking to see what impact that's having. You can't just put these things in and then hope they have an effect. You've got to measure what's going on to see if it's even having an impact. And if it's not having an impact, fade it out. Try something else or evaluate it and move it on. We once did a really big study for an operator that does a lot of medical wellness, and they had this program and they were convinced that the people who did the program stayed longer than people who just had their standard onboarding. And you know what? They were right, they did. But the only people who were self-presenting for this particular medical onboarding were women over the age of 50. Now, what they then had to do was think about how they would market and present it so it was more acceptable for other age groups and other genders. But they weren't wrong. It was effective. It just was only attracting a certain group. So this is why you want to test and measure to see the impact of what you're doing. Now that's it for this session. So we've talked about this onboarding process for perhaps the gym and the studio environment. I'm conscious we've been more focused on the gym environment than the studio, but we can also do the same thing for group exercise, for swimming academies. We can do it for the personal training processes. We can have all sorts of different onboarding processes. Now, there's the onboarding process that leads up from the sales process to the turning up with a member of staff. You need to plan that out as well. But you need to get really clear right at the beginning. Who are you going to support? Who's going to go through this onboarding process? And who are appropriate to do less or do nothing of that process? That's it for this session. In the next session, I'm going to talk about building exercise adherence and building loyalty for those people who stay successfully exercising and what you can do to enhance that within your business. That's it for now. I look forward to seeing you soon.